are artificial structures, that man is a mechanical, electrical, chemical machine. There are no gods, no devils. All that's man-made crap. Astrology, handwriting analysis, ESP, all bullshit. Okay? Now, what we talk about are things what we call in the real world. Because you need oxygen, clean water, clean air. And people turn to metaphysics. They turn to notions of God and ESP when the real world is painful and hard to deal with. Where they can't figure out things. And they look at the universe and all the wonders of nature and the total complexity of things. It's so overwhelming to them that they say there has to be some intelligence. After all, how do the birds migrate? And how do they know how to build a nest? Because they don't go to school. So therefore they figure there must be something out there. Not a guy with a beard, but some universal force or cosmic consciousness that pervades all space. We think that's a crock of shit too. Okay? So we're going to get into it and lay it out. So if you say you're open-minded, which is a very difficult thing to be, is to be able to hear what I say. Instead of getting angry at what I say, possibly many years ago, a lot of people got angry at Galileo when he said the earth was round. Because everybody could see it was flat. And so they felt so secure in their flat world concept that they wouldn't let their children play with his children. And they said, well, Galileo was a troublemaker. Okay? The purpose of these meetings is to make you think, get up off your ass and drop all the old ideas and move on toward a new world, a new way of thinking. Most people can't make it. So don't worry about it if you can't make it. But instead of walking out of here saying that guy is full of shit, I don't agree with anything he said, if you honestly disagree, bring it up, but don't fight. If you fight, you'll be asked to leave. If you disagree, try to point out the shortcomings. Well, here's what I mean by that. Try to give you a review of the new language. If I were to present you with, which I won't in a session, a front view of an airplane, and you say that that airplane isn't any good, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. But if you said it doesn't have enough dihedral, that is, the wings move up enough, or the propeller is too small for the size of the plane. So when you disagree with me here today, try to be specific. Don't say, oh, that's not possible. Say, perhaps point to specifics. Otherwise, I would have to consider that noise. We talk of language in a different way. We consider that most people make noise at each other. What we try to talk about is signal. The signal to noise ratio is what you get in, I have to use military communications. I'm not interested in military at all. But when military men talk, or naval men talk in a submarine, everything they talk about during the operation submarine is related to the operation of the submarine. Now, if somebody says, how are your children? You say, not too good. One of them has kidney failure and needs a transplant. Have you got one? You say, no. Well, I don't have the money to maintain my child. Have you got any money for it? And I say, no. Then why do I ask you, how are your children? You understand what I mean? We call normal conversation high noise level. That there are thousands of starving people in Africa, and I say, let us pray. That's noise, okay? Signal is packaging food, agronomy, techniques for soil rebuilding, sending it over there. That's the thing I'm talking about. The church, to me, is a lot of water sprinkling, a hell of a lot of noise, no signal, okay? Jesus got up off his ass, and he helped the sick, and he bandaged their legs, and he cleaned their wounds. And when he came home tired, he washed the feet of his disciples. He didn't say, I'm the Christ, start washing my feet. You understand? All right, today, the world has switched over to a bullshit level, and religion has become superficial and phony. Let me say it carefully so you don't misunderstand me. All religion, higher plane mysticism from the East, the Swamis, all those boys are phony. Now, the original, the guys that set it up, were phonies. But the students that followed them really thought that they were sincere. After they died, a lot of the Swamis walking around today are straight, a lot of them. Some are phonies. But the guys that started the whole religious package were frauds, which I'll try to prove to you. I'll try. I don't say that I can. Depends on what you read, what your background is. Okay? Well, we'll talk about other things tonight other than that. And what do you guys want to talk about tonight? Do you have any particular favorite areas? I'll try to brush through the common things, the basic ideology. But if you want to get in specific subject tonight, I'd like to do that. What's your favorite area? Yeah.
Where machines will go, computers. I'm reading
Where they will go?
Think My Machine. I'm reading that book now.
Pfeiffer?
I believe so. And he talks about it, but the book was written in 1957, and he says a machine will never do more than what it's programmed to do.
Oh,
Well, that's standard.
my question kind of ties into that.
Okay.
You've often talked about...
Did you get yesterday's session?
Yeah.
You understand it all right? That should answer a lot of your questions.
Well, this question has to do with something you haven't talked about in the past that I know of, and that is the shape, the design of the future men. And I don't mean the primate style.
You mean the new breed? You
when
mean
men
engineered
begin to
men?
develop men, right.
Okay. Okay. I'll try to get to that. You may have to remind me.
All right, maybe tomorrow.
Okay. No, I'll try to get to that tonight. Do you have anything? Anybody else want to talk about anything special? We talk about anything related to man except business. Okay? We think all that will be phased out. Eventually, meaning not too far off. And I guess we just have to wait till 9. Some people come in the last minute. And I'll elaborate on what I said. I mean, I don't mean to just slough it off like that. I will tell you how we mean that. Is there anything you'd like covered tonight? Anything particular? We'll start out with somebody had a first subject you wanted. What was that?
How far machines will go.
How far they will go.
He said they would never program these.
That man doesn't think, and there's some people that say machines don't think. Well, we see man as a machine. Here's what we mean by that, just so you don't misunderstand. It's a semantic problem. In order to close your hands like that, there got to be muscles that pull it. In order to, there have to be nerve currents. In order to roll the eyeballs in that direction, there have to be muscles that pull it. It doesn't just roll without some physical connectivity. And if you say, "My, that's a beautiful tune," and you're sitting in an English church, I'm sure that a man from New Guinea hears it differently. So your decision about music you like has to do with your contemporary culture, the language you use, the way you cut your hair, your posture, good morning, all that is trained, like a dog. Only a dog doesn't have enough neurons to go much beyond what its immediate needs may be. Man has a larger brain and therefore is capable of greater acts of violence and greater performance in stupidity, which is never talked about. The bigger the brain, the more stupid you can become. You understand that? You can learn to hate Negroes, Swedes, Jews, medical doctors, chiropractors, anything you're trained to hate. You understand me? All right. So the bigger the brain, a gigantic brain in an environment of stupidity, man becomes massively stupid. You understand that? Now, if you're born with a good brain, high quality, good conduction, well-formed neurons, and you're brought up in a Nazi culture, you become a super Nazi. There's no mechanism in the brain that can weigh out what you call right from wrong, good from bad. But there's no mechanism. And the only way information gets to your brain is either through the eye, the optic nerve, the temporal lobe, through hearing, through touch, through smell. There is nothing else in the brain except the reflex mechanisms. But if a man is born blind, there's no development in the occipital lobe. If you were born blind, there's no neural organizations in the region of sight. None. So therefore, a man is born with no instincts. There are no instincts. There are no gifted people, no talented people, no good people, and no bad people. If you're brought up by a mean family without warmth, love, and understanding, and they're Mohammedans and they hate Christians, you will throw stones at Christians as a child. Now, no God or no devil is going to punish you because that's what you're brought up to do. If you're brought up in a Nazi culture and they wave the flag, you get a lump in your throat. You're brought up in an American culture and wave the flag, you get a lump in your throat. You hold up a cross, you get a lump in your throat. If you lay 2 sticks of wood on the ground and you piss on it, no one gets mad. Nail them together like this and everybody gets mad. You understand? This is all trained. Because if you give a child a cross, they say, "That's a small hammer." You say, "No, that's a cross." You give them all that. Then you say, "Kiss it." And what am I kissing for? Never mind that, just kiss it. And the guy goes over and kisses it. Then he passes a building with a pointy roof and nothing happens. Somebody nails a cross on it and he goes like that. So this is what I mean by man doesn't think. He's like a mirror. In other words, if you brought up a child in an environment where you talk to him, say, what is it that you like, my son? If you spoke like that, he will speak like that, or she will speak like that. If you bring up a Chinese baby in an environment where a man says, that's fine, that's right, you right, mm-hmm, Chinese baby will speak like that. There's no natural way to speak. So when a man says, I'm going to get me a nig and beat the shit out of him, that isn't him talking. That's a mirror image of his culture. Is there anyone who doesn't understand that? Had he been brought up by the headhunters of the Amazon, he'd be a headhunter. That's all I'm trying to say. That's what I mean when I say man cannot think or reason. He is programmed by his society. And after they get through with you, when you're very young, when you're just about gibber, they say, mommy, daddy, right away, mama, over and over again. They repeat, milk, light, paper, board, light, clock, elephant, house, dog. You say, dog, elephant, house, clock. That's what I mean by man doesn't think. He doesn't reason either. Because when he's very young, he says things like, what made all this? Now, as a child, he sees things made. Somebody bakes a loaf of bread, somebody carves a plate, or screws something together and makes something. So he thinks the earth was made in that way. You see? So he says, what makes the earth? But the child doesn't know what it's saying. It's merely a repeat. This was made in a factory, this was made in a paper mill. So he says, what makes the earth? He's not asking, what is the nature of organization of matter? The child doesn't have that complexity. When mother hears what makes, he says, oh, Daddy, come in here, listen to that. He's just a jerk. Children are very stupid. And they look up and grin and say they love you. They love the lollipop man more than you. They don't have any real in-depth feelings. When they cry, it's superficial. They repeat themselves. Lie, lie, lie. I got a pencil. I got a pencil. I got over and over again. See? And they're self-centered. They're the maximum expression of selfishness. And yet women are brought up to love kids. They're a pain in the ass. They repeat themselves continuously. And first of all, most people don't like kids. They try to get them off to play in their room or go on out and play. And then they send them to school. I said, geez, I'm glad they're off to school. See? I said, when are they going to get married? Get them out completely. See? But somebody's been working on it for years. Don't you want to have 2 kids, a little boy and a little girl, carry your name into the future? All the shit, see? Well, they have these kids, and when the kid's 18, he leaves, as a rule. It's got no use for the old man. The old man's dragging his ass, doesn't move fast enough. Why don't you get a haircut, son? You know, the nonsensical concepts that most of our parents have. They belong to a world long dead. Now, some parents keep up with things, and this is very rare. So we'll move on to man briefly. Since children are the early stages of man, and very primitive, most people don't like adults, because adults are a pain in the ass. So why the hell associate with a low grade of adult? Right down here you got the lowest grade. Repetition, selfishness, centeredness, because they're brought up that way. This is why they're like that. Now, when you meet a person, you say, how do you do? I'm very pleased to meet you. All that's repeat. Because if a guy says, are you pleased to meet me? I said, I don't know yet. I'll let you know Wednesday. Is that right? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the girl says, oh, I'm getting married. I don't say, do you guys have enough in common? Do you share values and views? Do you both like the same kind of things? Do you listen to each other? Are you capable of modifying one another? She says, well, I don't know about that. I said, you better look into it. But saying, I wish you a happy, long life, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And this is the way normal people talk, okay? From this point of view, normal people are unsane, not insane. Unsane. The way they're brought up in the school system and in the culture, and they're given a language that just hasn't the means for communication. Communication, then, is a phony word. I maintain here that people cannot communicate with one another, that I can't communicate with you. But what I can do is this. If you've read similar books, have similar experiences, and the things I talk about, you have a reference for in your background, then we can identify. Now, here's another reason why, or a mechanism to show that man can't think. if I were to put a group of Chinese or Japanese characters on the board, and let's say you were a very good mathematician or physicist, and I said, take your time, figure it out. You can go like that till your chins disappear, and nothing happens up here, except that it's related to the Orient. That you got from movies or books. You know what I mean? If you think and rub your head, nothing happens unless the image is familiar. Now, if I draw this picture quickly, somebody says, oh, you know, that's a jet aircraft or something. But if I bring it to New Guinea, way back in the woods, what's that? You understand? If you open the back of an electronic computer and show it to a butcher or an interior decorator or a fashion designer, say, what do you think? Nothing happens. You understand what I'm saying now? Man can only assemble the things he's been exposed to. So in order to try to prove that to you, I'm going very fast, only because I like to weed out those that can't make it, okay? I'm going to go fast, and I'm going to say things like this. I'm going to draw pictures on the board. And these pictures are not going to be complete intentionally. And the purpose of these pictures is for you to attempt to predict what it is that I draw before I finish it. And so, as you see a few lines occur on the board, the minute you know what it is, interrupt me, okay? Tell me all that you can about it.
It's an insect of some sort?
I'll stop drawing when you hit it.
Excuse me, it's a woman or a man. That's the eyebrow.
Right.
That's
All right.
right.
Okay, you hit it, okay? Is there anybody that can't see it? Raise your hand. Don't worry about it if you can't see it.
Oh, well.
Angles, radical.
Okay, that's fine.
Fantastic
It's
view.
laying on the side.
I'm trying to prove something here. I'm trying to prove that you, and many people here, can call an object before it's finished because you looked at people and picked up bits. If there's enough bits to form a gestalt, you close. You see what I mean? Fine. I'm trying to prove that man can do what some people call ESP or intuitive feelings that they have on. There's nothing intuitive. It's always structured like this. That all information is based upon associative memory. You have to have these products in your head. Those that can't see it, I'll move on now. If he didn't guess what that was, you see, I would go on like that, you know, until we had a whole picture of sand here with, you know, lying down, etc., or Jennifer, whatever I decide to. Okay? So, I'm trying to prove that the brain could assemble something before it's finished. Okay? If I take another thing now, you tell me all that you can about this thing. What? No.
It's a cat.
Rat.
You baggy.
It's a rat. Or a mouse. Okay? Now, I haven't drawn this particular thing before, but it is possible, and I'm trying to show you it's possible for human beings to take a little bit of information and assemble it. That's
We have little mice in our.
aha.
Little constrictor.
Associative memory. Okay.
Right.
So anyway, if you didn't call it, I would have gone on like that, you know.
Excuse me a minute.
Yeah.
Did you know that was going to be a cat or a rat when you started?
Oh
making
yes,
your line?
I know before I started. Okay. I head for something in particular. Okay? All right, so I would, I'll make another picture now, and it's a little less familiar. What you're supposed to do is tell me all that you can tell me about it. Not only that it's a given thing, but try to tell me as much as you possibly can. This answer is most likely to come from a male.
Is that a car?
Yeah, who said that? No, no.
That's a ground line shot in the rear end.
Most likely.
Most likely. But it is true. It most likely.
Today she was looking at her gas tank.
Is that right? All right. If she didn't call, is there anyone that can't see it?
I
Raise your
can't
hand.
see it then.
Okay. Why don't you explain it?
Finish the drawing, come on.
Something like that.
Oh, yes.
This is supposed to be underside view of the car. Do you see it now? With the differential and then the transmission and the engine casing here. Anyone can't see it? Kind of a simplified sketch. I can go into more detail. Okay? Now we'll take one more and then we'll move on into the subject. We're proving something here called associative memory. If you've never seen an airplane or automobile, there's no way to call it. If you go to the Dutch East Indies and draw a cyclotron, everybody sit around for weeks and nothing happens. Okay? You don't make decisions, what I'm trying to say. Man is not capable of making a decision. In any way at all, he never makes decisions, nor is he capable of doing so. Here's what that means. That means that children might sit on almost anything, and the parents say, you sit on a chair, you don't sit on a lamp. You eat with a spoon, not a fork. You can't eat soup with a fork, you see? So they give them a pattern. So everybody uses that pattern, and the goddamn fork looks the same for 150 years. They haven't changed the goddamn thing. Oh, they put a little curlicues on it here and there. We'll leave them out. So they stop. And what happens is the violin, many musical instruments look the same for years. Because the men in the field, somebody once said, that's a beautiful instrument, and it stays the same. But the phonograph, the thing you wind up, changes. Radios change, automobiles change, airplanes change. And music world is dragging its ass. And religion is dragging its ass. It's been dragging, singing the same story for thousands of years. You know, if I got up and I started talking about kerosene lamps, you would say, where have you been, person? You know. Well, the point is, religion is the greatest ass-dragging system on earth. Because the minister carries one book. And the book is full of shit. There's nothing in it that makes sense at all. It's full of lies, fables. No.
Yeah.
Einstein has a room full of books. And I said, boy, you sure know a lot. He said, Jesus Christ. He said, I hardly know anything. This only tells me how much there is that I must begin to look into. Okay? And this asshole walks around with a book and talks of cosmic consciousness. He isn't even conscious of the fart he lays, or the process for doing it. That's how low level they are. And some of these people that talk of cosmic consciousness don't even know how fluids pass through a membrane. And they want cosmic consciousness. They don't even know how an automobile works or what a spark plug is. They talk of cosmic consciousness. They don't even know how many cells they have in their own brain or how the retina receives an image. So you can imagine what cosmic consciousness is. They don't even hope to understand what Yuri talked about, or even the primitive or a child's interpretation of the theory of relativity. They say, that's beyond me. I say, what do you say? Cosmic consciousness. A real pinhead if they ever existed. So, I'm trying to tell you something. That 90% of what the members of the culture believe in is erroneous. Their language is false. Their general beliefs are false. Because they talk to people that live next door. And they don't know their ass Mahone now. So you got the same story all the way through. What we're trying to do is invade the dominant value system of this culture, meaning the things that people believe in and cherish. We say they were false and they were structured by a control group many years ago. I believe that early kings and landowners had given the great majority of people a value system or a way of thinking that will support them in power. In other words, if I'm a king, I say, who's the greatest man on the island? You say, I don't know. Ellen. The king. Put here to rule over you by who? God, right. The talk against the king is a super sin. Good. And you take all the children, go to work on what's the greatest flag in the world? The American flag. Terrific. Raise your right hand. I pledge allegiance to the flag. What do you mean by allegiance? I don't know. Right on and on over again. Now you got 1,000,001 robots. Then after you get through with them, you line them up your way. Then you have them stand up and you give them the final product with bullshit called We Are Free. They all hold up their hand in Nazi Germany when they're 12 years old singing a song, We Are Free. Okay? No one is free. We are all prisoners of our culture, prisoners of our value system. In fact, so uniform are we that the male approach of the female is very uniform. Rarely if a guy gets you into a dark area and starts playing with your ear only, you say, this guy is very original. You want him to be like everybody else. Rarely do you run into a nose man, do you? He says, I'm crazy about your nose. He's rubbing it all day long. See, now, most people are uniform. They reach for the tit and you say, it's getting late, I gotta go home. See, they all say the same thing. or we hardly know each other, or some goddamn shit like that. Or there's somebody else. The guy always says the same thing. He always holds your hand, he strokes your hair, puts your head together, and you hug each other. Always the same. Now, if it's different, the guy is queer, or he's deviant. Okay? Now, I'm not saying there's right or wrong or good or bad, but I'm trying to tell you that the product called behavior is just like a stamping machine, okay? And people are no different than machines. Now, when machines get hot, sometimes today they turn themselves off. In the early days, smoke would come out of the bearings. Recently get red hot and then burst aside. Now they got electrical sensors in the machine, so if your electric motor gets too hot, it turns itself off. That's called feedback, but not man. You know, when you catch a guy in bed with your wife, you don't turn off. You don't say, well, perhaps he has need or she has need for someone else. You know, you turn off. Goddamn son of a bitch. No machine would do that. That's what I mean. Now, where'd you get that from? That isn't human nature. Somebody poked you in the ribs when you were young and said, you let that guy fool around with your girlfriend, I'd let him have it. They give you that value system. That means that if you were an Eskimo, see, and I came to your village, you say, I got 9 wives, Matilda's the best, why don't you go to bed with her? And if you say no, or I say no, they're hurt. So what happened to jealousy? Where is it? That's made by man. There's no jealousy, no envy, no rage, no competition spirit. There's no survival tendencies in man, otherwise we'll be working on nuclear weapons or go to war. If man had an instinct for survival, he'd never go to war. He said, go on, son, fight. In other words, the whole idea that all the myths that they give you is to support this economy. And in Russia, they raise their people to support that economy. In China, the same thing. So we're trying to say that all governments are basically corrupt. Republican, Democrat, I don't give a shit what you vote for. These men are basically corrupt. Now let me tell you what that means. That means that if I run for high political office and you put up $40,000 to help me get in, and you own a paving company, when the contracts come around of putting in roads, I've got to take care of you. If you represent the Miami hotel lobby and you say, what are your feelings on hotels on Miami Beach? I think we want to have private beaches. And you say, good, Fresco, here's $10,000 to help you get in. Why do people support any politician? Because they have vested interests. Is that clear? Now, politicians cannot be sincere, whether it's Kennedy or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They are all as full of shit as a Christmas turkey. The whole slew of them. Because if you are the governor of this state, and I say, governor, we've got a bunch of old wooden schools, we need a brick school building, you say, right on, Fresco. And you go to Tallahassee, one of the other politicians say, well, look, you help me pass this bill to get a playground in this area, I'll help you with the school bill. You say, well, we don't need a place. And you have to make these deals, you understand? That's what I mean by they never represent people. The politician gets to an industrial place, he says, the backbone of America. He talks to American mothers, he says, the future civilization is in your hands. They're always bullshitting with everybody. That's why they're popular. They sing the song of the area. See, I don't give a shit whether you come back here or not. I'm only interested in social sanity. If you come back, fine. If you don't come back, it's your problem, not mine. Because I don't think we have much time left. We're moving rapidly toward nuclear annihilation. The world is comprised of very stupid people. The same kind of people that ran the show before are still in power. Therefore, we cannot work through politics. We have to form a new organization, and we have to use the whole world together as one system toward the brotherhood of man, not with the Bible or anything else. We have to control the environment, pollution. We have to invite students from all over the world of this country. We have to have an open system, no flag waving, no nationalism, and use the earth to enhance the lives of all people on earth. This is what we want to do. It's a tough thing to do. It's not easy. But if we don't do that, it'll only be just a few years before we're involved in the biggest and hellish war that's coming. Because the stupidity is still the same. Now, we don't know. We think that the probability of our organization making it is very low. But the other alternative is unacceptable. So we're trying for a new way of thinking. We think this is the only hope. We don't believe in shooting anybody, a revolution. We think this system is so inefficient that it'll fall. And when it does, you better have another way of doing things. So briefly, this is what we stand for. This is the basic ideas of the organization. And now I'll try to get to your subject. How far are the machines going to go? Do you want to start with present, or do you want to move on from a certain point in the
No,
future?
you can start from now to the future.
Okay. The first guy that dug a hole in his hands, see, he was tired doing that. You scuff your fingers, you get all kinds of scrape marks on it, thorns when you're digging a hole. The first guy that picked up the seashell and dug with it, or anything like it, was the first man to use a tool. That's called a hand tool economy, where you use seashells or shovels. Hand tool. Where you use your bare hands, it's called a non-tool using economy. So the seashell is the first tool. But in using a seashell, you have to bend down. It took hundreds of years for some guy to tie a branch to a seashell and make a shovel. That took a long time. Okay? Now, also, when you move into that, that's called extensional device. All tools are extensional devices. They extend man's needs. In other words, the shovel serves that purpose. Now, if you try to pick up water with your hands open like that, it leaks through. When you close it, or if you got partly open, water spills out. So you assume posture to pick up water because you want water to get to your mouth. If you're a cerebral insufficient, it's always open, no water comes up, they never change. You keep going like that. Well, most politicians are that. So you put your hands together to prevent the water from leaking out. Now when you split a coconut in half, it resembles that. So people do a mirror takeoff from this, and they move to the coconut shell. And gradually you move up to the tool and die makers or the printing press. Now we say nobody ever invented anything. That's what I mean by man can't think. The first guy that was dyeing fabric with berries leaned on his wife's tablecloth one day, and there was a print of his hand on it. It suggested the printing press, so he put his hands on it. Well, he put a fish in berry juice and pressed it against the tablecloth, and there was the first printing press. Nobody ever sat down and said, "We've got to print books, we've got to print." Think of what I did. It doesn't work like that. It comes real slow over a long period of time. Gradually, you had a guy with a hammer that hammered out a pot, metal. And later on, they made one gigantic hammer called the male aspect of the die, and another hammer that was recessed, a negative hammer, and they put a hunk of sheet metal between and brought them together, and they had a pot. Now, that is called mechanization. And then they began to line up these machines, and they used to put a square of metal in there to make a pot. And bingo, would stamp it up, and then they'd cut the edges, and they put another square of metal. Finally, they moved into automation, where they take a whole roll of metal like that, and it moves at almost a mile a minute. And the plant while that metal is unraveling. You understand what I mean? Instead of putting sheets in each side. That's automation. When you line up a whole bunch of machines. Now, mechanization is when a guy drills a hole in this sheet of metal, right, with a drill press. Then he takes it to the next guy, and the guy stamps the name of the company on it. Then he takes it to another guy, and he puts screws in it. See, that's mechanization. Automation is when you line up all the machines in a row and move the guys out, most of the guys out. And they just operate switches when the metal comes in. Now, there used to be, on a production line, do you mind if I run through this way?
No.
This is a roll of metal. And as the roll of metal runs through rollers here, which these rollers come together and they squeeze the metal thinner. And if they want it even thinner, they have another set of rollers here. Now, sometimes, some of the metal comes through, and the movement of the rollers are not, in the early days, were not easily controllable. So sometimes the metal will come out thick, and sometimes it come out thin. So these machines that turn very fast, the roll of metal like toilet paper moving along, here are the rollers in perspective. There was a problem. Sometimes the metal come out thick, sometimes too thin. They used to stop these machines, and they had a guy called quality control. He came over with a little mic, and he mic'd the thickness of the metal. He measured the thickness to stop it, to make sure it was okay. It took many, many years for a guy to put a mic, an instrument, here on the machine, and a rolling wheel here connected to that instrument. So while it was rolling, if the thickness ever became greater or thinner, it shut the machine off. See what I mean? Instead of a guy coming over checking it. Now, some people in our society tell us, they're lying to us, that machines make jobs. Nobody would take in 9 sewing machines if it made more jobs. You take in a sewing machine because you get 100 times the work out of one woman that's doing it by hand. Then they tell you, but somebody's got to take care of the sewing machine. How often does your mother call anyone in to take care of the sewing machine? It runs for years, see? So what happens in this system of feedback, when the machine can turn itself off if it isn't running well? That system there is automation. When the thing runs along and all the machines stamp, and if there's no metal on the machine, it won't come down. Now, in the early days, if the guy looked under the machine, it came down on him sometimes. That was the end of sand. Then they painted all moving parts white. That's a cheap, inefficient approach. Then they put a sound scanner under there. If any human or a cat or a hand was there, it can't come down. So they put photoelectric systems there and other devices so the machine can't come down on a man. Now the machines are becoming more intelligent. They have feedback. But no machine says, good morning, how are you? Yet. Because we don't need that in machine yet. Right. Now machines are not too smart today because people don't want machines to be smart. So I'll design what you call a thinking machine, using the old language, to show you how it would operate. Here's an automobile, kind of a simple car, early day style. Is there anybody that can't see that? Now inside each tire, I'll draw a tire here, there's a balloon with equal air pressure, equal pressure to that of the inside of the tire. If you kick the tire, boom, suddenly like that, it squeezes that ball. Does anybody doesn't understand that? The ball is inside the tire and it's connected to a transducer, pressure transducer. It's an electrical instrument. When you press, it generates electricity. So when you kick the front left tire, it goes to a tape recorder inside and says, ouch, my front left tire. Now if you put pressure transducers in all tires, and you had a tape recorder and a speaker system in front of the car, and there's a lot of bumps in it. Ow, ooh, ah, ooh. If it was that type of bump, if it was a graceful bump, see, so each tape goes on. Now you don't want your car to do that. Now you can do this. Around the wheel bearings, well, if you run out of lubrication, if it isn't sealed bearings, you put a thermocouple, that's a heat sensor, and it runs into a tape, multi-tape deck that is on a carbon wheel. Now, if the bearing gets so hot, if it gets hotter, it says, ah! See? And if it gets hotter than that, I'm burning up! Ah! See? So each reel is turned depending on the heat. Engineers have found that it'd be better when the bearing became arrived at a temperature that began to be detrimental, a lubrication system was turned on. Is that clear? Instead of the thing saying, I'm burning my ass off. See, you lubricate or cool it. So the engineers put systems in the production line where it doesn't complain, but they give man, shit, it's hot in here. God damn it, I missed the bus. No machine ever says that, because it's superfluous behavior. All they want in the machine is to turn itself off when it isn't working, turn itself on when it's working, you see, when everything is all right. But man has bitching. If he misses a bus, if it goes away in perspective to the vanishing point, he says, shit, have I gotten here a minute early? I had to call the bus. What's that got to do with anything? The bus is gone. If he makes something out of glass and he drops it, he says, God damn it, I had to go all the way downtown to get that goddamn parts and make, he's jerking off intellectually. So once you drop a hunk of glass, go in there and get the mop and dustpan, sweep it up and say, that's the end of the glass. I used to have a nice glass object around. But if you start pulling on your hair about something that's already happened, you're wasting your time. Or you go down and you get a new hunk of glass. You see, you start all over again. But, and work and build a unit around your table so it's less apt to fall off. Okay? You build a wall around it. Or you put a rubber padding on the floor. And don't assume it's not going to break. Just put the rubber padding on the floor and go to work on it. Then your kid comes and says, Mommy, what's this clump? See? This is how interesting. You got to keep the child out of the area the next time, etc. So this is how we learn. I generally say I make more mistakes than anybody I know because I try more things. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. It's a great thing. This is how we learn. This is how all the great books were written. So we get back to this production line. Actually, it all started, all of this kind of work was concentrated at a place called the Hughes Aircraft Factory. This is where automation and cybernation began. So I'm going to try to tell you the difference. Automation is a gigantic feedback production line. Cybernation is different. At the Hughes aircraft plant, they got a master machinist. And if this is a piece of metal spinning on a lathe or just turning, and this is a cutting tool, as the tool moves in to the metal while it's turning, it cuts a groove in it. And if it moves out and in again, it cuts another groove. So as this tool moves up and back, it shapes the metal, something like the early furniture lathes. That's called turn. That's turned on a lathe. Things that you've seen that look like this. It's generally a piece of wood that they put on a spinning device, and they have a cutting tool that moves against the wood while it's turning, and they move it around, and they shape it any way they want to. Hughes was the first guy, as this master machinist was machining a very accurate part, all the forward and backward and traveling motions were put on tape right from the machine. Do you get that? So the master machinist worked the dials, he controlled the thing, and turned out a perfect part. And this was a big, fat, magnetic tape, like the kind you have in a tape recorder. All of his movements were put on tape. Then they put a brand new piece of metal in there. It was not shaped. And they turned on the tape. And the tape operated the tool that moved up and back. Is that clear? That's cybernation, when you move the guy out. So the Hughes Aircraft Company then did an experimental job in which they took a solid block of metal and they carved an airplane wing out of it, machined it right out of the solid block. It had to be a high-speed, high-stress wing, and they made it out of solid metal, machining it up. Now, there was a giant machine. It was kind of a milling machine. It moves up and back, in and out, drills, bores, reams. And that machine had a multi-channel tape to turn that out. So if the Hughes Company got a contract for landing gear parts, they put that tape in, the machine to make landing gears. They pull it out, and they put the one in to make wings. You understand? Instead of calling the master machinist, tapping on the shoulder, and say, make 47 of these parts, why do you have the same guy there making 47 parts? And here's what that means in your terms. That means if you go to a beauty parlor, you don't mind if I use you, do you? You got a beautician, whatever you call them, that you like, that styles your hair your way. That beautician puts their hands in gloves, and they work your hair. So your head's in a fixed point. They make sure your head's in a certain position. They hold your head up or so. Or they'll work on you while you're moving your head around. Either way. So they work on your hair, and there's a gadget that looks like a camera, and it photographs you while you're sitting there, and it makes a duplicate motion of all her finger movements on your hair on tape. Is that correct? And you have 67 styles that you like. All you do is move in and dial 344, and you sit there. And it does your hair exactly like Jennifer would. Exactly. When you go in the kitchen, and you put a pinch of salt, a chicken in there, applesauce with whatever shit you want to put in the chicken. Every move you make is put on tape. So in the morning, your husband says, bacon and egg. What? Laundry? What the hell are you going to every fucking morning, frying eggs again and again and again? And school teachers go to school and say, once upon a time, there was Cinderella, over and over again. We want to free all people of repetitive tasks, to cybernate everything, and have everybody go off and travel, go back to school free, water ski, motor boating, travel, books, creativity, that kind of thing.
Music.
Everything, whatever people get into. So later on, we'll phase out when we have to phase out. All right, now, so far, are you clear on cybernation?
Yes.
Cybernation is a tape in automation. Any questions about that up to now?
Now where will it go?
Okay. Now the trouble is, once you put a tape in there, the machine is technically obligated to carry out what is on that tape. Now, if a rat crawls over the part while it's being machined, it doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? The machine doesn't say, well, it's a rat. A human does. In other words, if you're sawing wood and a little baby crawls under it, you stop, right? That's because you've been conditioned not to saw babies, okay? When in a concentration camp, the guys get a lot of people in the gas chamber, they turn the lever, and they say, Mac, have you got a match? I want to light us down. And they don't say, poor people are being gassed. They're conditioned to do that. The hangman there, he's going to be hung, he is. And he presses the lever, and the guy is out, and he says, one lousy man out of the way, you know. So these people have no feelings either. So don't think that people have feelings. That's a lot of shit, because sometimes a clean-cut, God-fearing, church-going guy gets into playing, and he presses a little button, the whole city disappears under him. And the guy pats him on the back and says, boy, you sure hit that right on the nose. Where's his feelings? Because that area, he's told, that people with the crooked eyes are no fucking good. They're sneaky, slanty-eyed bastards, see? The guys with the big lips, liver lips, and niggers, see? And they're given a set about people. So the cop hits him on the head. The other guy says, was he hurt bad? He's only a nigger. You understand what I mean? So what is feelings? Feelings is something you're trained to. You can wipe out feelings. You can take a dog and have it attack all kinds of people or help old ladies across the street. When you see a dog help an old lady across the street, you say, isn't that a wonderful dog? And I say, no, it's not. And when you see a dog tearing children to pieces, jumping at Japs and soldiers, fierce as hell, it says, bad dog. But that dog is trained to do that, just like man. Man is trained to hate, to love, to feel, to care. That's why if there is a God, you say you'd like to believe in God, he would never judge anybody for anything. Because whatever the hell a man does is proof that he's been through that routine to make him do it. In other words, if you were a headhunter and I came to visit you, and I said, it's a shame that you have 10 heads on the wall there. You say, yes, it is. My brother has 40. Someday I may have 40. You know what I mean? But you're not going to be moved with a lump in your throat. You see what I mean? So feelings are trained. Now you got to think about a lot of these things and using the old language, the things that I'm talking about, because I'm going fast. So we'll go back now to this system, the tape. The next phase beyond the tape, okay? We want machines. You have a question? Is that your recording?
Yeah, it ended, but this is the part I really want to.
You want to go beyond the tape. Is there anybody that doesn't understand it up now? I'll clarify it. Yes. You don't understand the tape?
No, it's not about that. I don't understand the machinist. Unless you paid him as much as he was going to make for the rest of the I don't understand why he would make that tape.
Well, he doesn't make the tape. His movements are tape. He doesn't even know it.
You know, oh, I see. All right, then I understand.
Now, you'll understand it right now that I know your question. When Caruso sang years ago, they made a record. He said, want to hear Caruso? He says, yeah. He said, no, you can't hear it. So you got a record. Now you can hear it. They made a machine that makes sounds like Caruso. Not too good in the early days, but today, with hi-fi and stereo, you can't tell that the Beatles aren't in the next room if you've got good equipment. So that is taping the Beatles. So everybody can hear the Beatles at once. Now, if 100 years ago or 300 years ago you said everybody can hear the Beatles at once, they said lock her up immediately. In other words, the point is, how can everybody hear the Beatles at once? That's the question. How? See, not, she's crazy, lock her up. So I'm going to try to show you, you understand that? They tape that too, don't they? When Yehudi plays the violin, don't they tape it? All right. Now, Yehudi submits. He says, okay, tape it, give me 10%, whatever the hell it is. That's an agreement. The master machinist gets $100 an hour. He thinks it's great. You understand what I mean? Yes. You have a question?
With what we have around us.
Now?
Yeah, you know, in the environment we live in, could we build an instrument to take feelings and...
Yes, very easy to do.
You think so?
Yeah.
Now, let's say you're predicting the future now. You think 20 years from now, what happens, or 100 years from now? You know, we can...
Well, let me follow through on this thing, and then I'll get back to you. Is that all right?
Sure.
Because I want to try to answer your question. Now, the next thing, you want the machine to do something more. What do you want it to do? It'd be better if I did it that way. Well, of course, if I just take it on, it might not be related to your needs.
I'd like to do everything.
You want me to take it on?
You take it.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody's on the tape region. The tape region tapes movement of a machine. Now we want to give a tape concern. Okay? Now, genuine concern. Here's what that means. You trip in the street. You got a bad cut. You're bleeding like mad. And some women come by and say, oh, it must be terribly painful. And they weep. And then they walk on and say, isn't that awful? We call that noise. Yakety yak yak. The guy that bends down, tapes up, does something, that's real. Is that all right? So far. So most behavior is noise. Okay? Now we want to give the machine real feeling. Here's how we do it. Now you got to listen very carefully, otherwise you get confused. First we turn the camera on you. You're relatively new. We photograph your face, a movie camera in color. And while your face is being photographed, you mind if I use, this is Jennifer, I say to the machine. This is Jennifer. Now the machine has crosshairs that travel over your face and scan every bit of your features, every line. And that's associated with the word Jennifer. Do you know what I mean by that? Or is that too fast for you?
You looking at me?
I'm looking at you. Is that all right? Okay. The machine scans your face for details, significant differences. All right. Then I'll just draw some phony faces here, see? As this machine scans these different people, there are very different lines, not only side view, front view, etc. Then, if I turn to the machine and hold up photographs of different people, it'll scan each one. But when Jennifer's back, it'll say, this is Jennifer. Now, children, when they first look at somebody, they go like that. Say, that's your Uncle Harry. Uncle Harry. See, you have to go over and over again. Now, what does Uncle Harry sound like? Well, until he talks, does the image of, let's this be Uncle Harry, does the image of Uncle Harry in his brain become linked with, however he talks? See? So the voice is linked. So if he hears that voice outside, these chains of associations are linked together. Because Uncle Harry's outside. Listen, you can't see him. How do you know it's Uncle Harry? Now suppose Uncle Harry walks with a great shuffle, too. So a shuffle becomes associated to these cells. You know what? The linkage, the associative memory, the shuffle. Then if he also has a breathing habit, if he breathes, that becomes linked. And if Uncle Harry, every time he drives up, his screeches his brakes on and hits the side of the curb, you know, and he slams the door, all he has to kid is, Uncle Harry is here, Mom. See? Same with the dog. A dog listens for your car. He listens for the slam. Then he runs the door and starts barking. He hears many things that he associates, or it associates with, in relation to you. So these links are made. The more things you know, the more cherries are on the connected system. That's called associative memory. That's how it works. Now, once this machine photographs you, we say Jennifer. And so the next time it comes, it says Jennifer. Now, we want the machine to say, how are you, and really mean it. So here's how we do that. The trouble with the English language is, what does really mean it? Because, gee, I'm sorry you hurt your knee, I really mean it. What does that mean? Does it really mean anything? Probably not. It only means something if something is done about it. Does that make sense to you? Okay, here's what we'll do now. In order to give it meaning, the machine photographs Jennifer, we say Jennifer. Then we show Jennifer with measles, scarlet fever, the mumps, dark rings under the eye, associated with fatigue, malaria, typhoid, meningitis. You photograph all kinds of human conditions and skin conditions with a color TV camera, with a telephoto lens, microscopic attachments. So all you do is hold your hand under the medical unit in the future, and the film goes by at 1,000 feet a second, comparing these images with all the known skin disease. Is that clear? That's what a man is. A man is a nothing thing. When he's studying medicine, smallpox, measles, and he studies the pattern. That's how he says A, B. If you write it in Turkish, the kid says nothing. So a doctor doesn't think. He looks and reacts. If he hasn't got anything, he goes like that. He says, let me call someone else. You know, a tropical disease. That's the guy who's been shown pictures of other things, you see? Ringworm, hookworm, whatever the hell it is. So what we do with the machine is we say, scarlet fever, malaria, smallpox, and photograph it from different angles, color scanning, okay? So when you walk in, it says, Jesus, you're fatigued, you need rest, etc. You understand what I mean? Just like Amanda, like her. He said, Jesus, what happened to you? Suppose we had a lot of kids in the room. The guy came in like that, and he did a backflip, climbed up the wall. Another guy came in like this, and went to sleep. The kid would associate this with activity. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Do you understand that? So a machine is no different than a man. Suppose I came in like this. He said, what are you trying to? In fact, I was born like that. See what I mean? The point is, we associate certain facial expressions with that. Now, there are some people that naturally sit like that. So what the hell are you frowning at? They're not frowning at anything. It's just, you know, wipe that fucking thing off your face or knock your goddamn teeth. People do that all the time. They project at other people. They project meaning in it, see? And it's really maybe your normal posture to sit like this. What do you think, you're smart? See? And sometimes the guy at a bar looks around to see if there's any friends. Right? And sometimes two guys sitting at a table, or a guy and a girl. And he leans over and says to the guy at the table, Jesus Christ, you've got an attractive girlfriend. And the guy says, don't you whisper about me, I'll knock your fucking teeth in. I'll wear any hat I please. He always assumes that they're whispering about him. Well, this is what we call a kind of illness, when you project a great deal. All right, so we get back to this system. Image recognition. Concern, then, is the act of minimizing the tension, the distortion, the disorder. Is that clear to you? Genuine. Now, does the machine feel good when it does it? Man feels good. Now, when you pick a cat up in the street that's been injured, you take it home, you get a lump in your throat. You stroke the cat, it purrs, and you feel good. Can you give a machine that? There are some people that see an injured cat and say, good, fucking thing, deserve it. See, they don't have that. Not every human has all of these qualities. They always talk about, once a minister, a priest, came into an area where two men were fighting, and he said, why can't you men behave like human beings? And he says, they are, Father. The point is, what assumption does he make? Human beings behave every which way. As bullies, as kind people, whatever the hell their range may be. So we get on, and here's how we give a machine feeling. I'd rather, if I went to a doctor and had a bad injury, I'd rather he wouldn't there me. You know what that means? There, son. Everything's going to be all right. Save your fucking voice and go to work on the condition. You know what I mean? Well, how's the children and the family? Don't give me any bullshit. Get the work on the knee. But in a therapy situation with a sweet old lady who doesn't have that kind of value system, it is much better to say, well, how's the family? And how's the dog and the cat? And all this shit, because that's part of therapy. It's unfortunate that it is. But someday man will go right to the point. Today they kind of beat about the bush. So what we're going to do is try to generate in machines functional concern. So as you're reading in the future, you're trying to learn how to remember things. As you're reading, the machine will watch the movement of your eyes and say, the reason you take so long to read is because your scanning habits are not well organized. It'll photograph your eye movements and then suggest how you read. Here's how it'll do that. By the pattern indicated of your eye movements, the way they go, see? It'll pick that up and then suggest that you follow this pattern. There'll be an opening that'll move along, and you'll follow that, see? And then the opening will stop, and the pages come back again bare, and you'll read it in a photograph, and I say, much better, but you began to hesitate about the third line. How does it know that? By the movement of your eyes. And the tape that it plays is related to your movement. Now, that's a tape you play. When somebody brings a dog in, beautiful color, reddish green with stripes, you say, oh, what a beautiful dog. That's when you don't say, another animal with different patterns of configuration. You don't do that. You say what you've been organized to say. The same with the machine. In other words, if I come home and say, my grandfather died, you say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I say, it was a pain in the ass. He should have died 20 years ago. When somebody says to me, my grandfather died, I say, how did you feel about it? He says, good written. Don't say, I'm sorry to hear it, because you don't know what the other person's thinking. He says, I got a divorce. He says, should have gotten it 20 years ago. Don't say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It may be a great thing. When a person gets married, it may be a great thing, or it may be a painful thing. So this is the kind of thing we think we can put into machines. So that someday, instead of having a government, we'll have a cybernated government. There's no corruption. Everything will run smoothly, because there won't be one machine. We know now that we need 6 units that can control society. If one fails, the other takes over. That's called redundancy. And so by designing a society with this kind of technological control, it doesn't control you. It just controls the movement of water, clean air, production lines, and you can go swim or walk through the forest if you want to. It just makes damn sure that man doesn't live in scarcity or hunger, want, or deprivation. In other words, if a child comes into the room and it's sad, the machine will say, hey, Bobby, there's an interesting film on today. Or the boys are all going boating today. Would you like to join? It'll recognize his attitude. Because if you were brought up in a gray ball and a kid came in like that, you wouldn't know what that meant. You understand what I mean? You associate that with feeling bad because you've been brought up that way. The machine can be given everything you're given plus something else. Now, the old propaganda that you got in the past, that a machine can never be any better than the designer. How many have heard that? How can it surpass the guy that designed it? First of all, I know this 75-pound guy that designed a machine to pick up freight trains and empty the coal. I know he can't do it. And the guy that designed radar, he can look out to sea, and he can't see airplanes the distance of the machine he designed to see. You understand what I mean? You've got to toss those ideas. They're lying to you. That a machine always surpasses the designer. Now, I've seen a guy design a machine, or a group of men, that can move at 20,000 miles an hour, 25,000 miles an hour, escape velocity, a rocket. Now, all the designers together running at full speed, the machine surpasses them. You understand? There are eyes and satellites, well, that could see an airplane, identify the airplane from 90 miles. They can't see the pilot's face yet, okay? But they're telescopic lenses moving around the sound. Now, the guy that designed that optical system, I don't give a shit how many drops of urine he puts inside and how clear the weather is. He can never see as well as that apparatus. Do you understand me? The guy that designed a microscope can't see a gnat's asshole. You understand me? So the whole myth that they're giving you out there is very dangerous. They're lying to you. The machines today can cut time into 1/10 billionths of a second. Now, I don't give a shit how fast you are. There's just no way. There are machines that can photograph, which was demonstrated tonight, a hummingbird in flight. The movement of the wings, the exact way they move. It can cut time, show mosquitoes' wings moving. You can't even see the mosquito. All you see is a blur. So if you organize all these machines together into a system, not programmed by man, you better get that on tape. Once you got a human programmer in there, you fuck it up badly. Because he puts into that machine that value system, okay? We want the machine to... How the cars that went by, or he reads the count and he misinterprets it. Or the machine also has connections to the consumer's market, where they go in and they buy things. The machine knows whether people are buying Polaroid cameras or box cameras, and the exact kind of thing people are picking. If they all happen to be picking the little type of automatic developing camera, that goes right back to central cybernation, turns on the plan to turn out the type of camera that people like. Is that correct? That's how you vote in the future. You don't vote. You vote for a certain guy and you don't get what you want. In the future, when you go into a certain area and pick a certain type of sailboat, then the manufacturer of that sailboat is connected to cybernation. In other words, if you don't understand me, here's a bunch of cigarettes in the back of a cigarette machine. Now, the amount of cigarettes stacked in that machine in the future, there won't be cigarettes. But I'm just talking about this as an analogy. Every time you pull out so many cigarettes, an automatic counting device, and it goes to central cybernation, which in turn turns out vitamin E or whatever the hell you want. You don't need a guy, there's how he said it, down a 40-pack. Then he takes it and then he mails it out to Sam, and Sam feeds it into the computer. Connect the computer to the social mechanism. Do you understand me? And you don't need Sam. You can free Sam so he can enjoy life. Most people do repetitious work. We think it's wrong for a person to type 8 hours a day, or drill holes in metal, or go through repetitive action. We would like to see them free. And the only way to free them, I'm talking about monotonous tasks. If you teach 2-year-olds or 5-year-olds, you're going to get them to say, who is Humpty Dumpty? Well, we can do probably a holographic image of you. You know what that is? That's something like this. Only clear, see? 3D. Standing in the room, you say, good morning, children. How are you on a trip to Istanbul? You know what I mean? And how would you like to hear Cinderella today? And you describe them, whatever the hell you're talking about. You understand what I mean? You don't have to come in there every day and say, Davy Jones, did you wash behind your ears? You don't need to go through that shit. So we give people tender, loving care another way. And that's where cybernation comes in. Some people say a child has to have a mother. Every time you bring up a child in an automated or mechanical system or an orphanage, something is missing. Because all the records in psychology and studies in human behavior show that warm, touch, tender, loving care is necessary. That's a crock of shit, too. That means that when they brought up a child without a mother and brought it up in an institution that didn't fare well, it didn't work out well, not because it didn't have a mother, because the design of the system was inadequate. Now, here's what that means. When a mother picks up a child, I'm exaggerating here because it's only certain mothers that do this, they hold the child so it's well-centered. They can feel that it's balanced. They hold it centered. But if you give a child to somebody who's never held a child, they hold it asymmetrically. A little too much pressure. And the child gyrates because it's not supported equally. That's because of asymmetric support. It isn't mama. That's the bullshit, the propaganda. So by designing a chamber, putting the child in, that automatically air loads, they're very sensitive units that feel the distribution of the weight of the child, and there's a small, I better describe it to you. Years ago, during World War II, a pilot that would have to sit in an airplane for great distances would always move around like that, because circulation is cut out when you lean this way, then you lean that way, so the blood flows. Otherwise, if you sat in one position, you wouldn't feel your ass. in 1 hour if you don't move around. So we designed a seat with a lot of little air cells in it. This would inflate, that would deflate, that's equal to moving your ass. You understand? You lean this way, and you lean. The seat does all the moving. You can sit still and feel very comfortable. The beds of the future will do that, because you lie in bed and you turn. They say, well, that's natural. It isn't natural. They turn because circulation's cut out. It's automatic. But if the bed moved, you wouldn't turn. You get a better sleep all around. So you follow the seat, and when you put a baby in that, it's automatically super sensitive. 50 times as sensitive as the most sensitive mother. See? And then and mother says, Mommy's little baby. The baby will say, oh, wow, interesting. See? The baby don't know what the fuck's going on. So what we do is we take a tonal scale and play it. Whatever sound system generates a rhythm to the motion. That's all the child gives a shit about. When you pick up a little tiny baby and say, who loves you more than anything in the world? It grins at your movement, then it drools. There's nothing there. I love you. You're a little angel. Nothing. Da, 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 da. Waste of time. See? So the future is to understand what we really are and stop jerking off. You know, there are many women that talk to their parents. They say, you know, it's raining. It hasn't rained in 3 days. They talk to their cats. You ever see that? Daddy will be home very soon. I know you're waiting and all that. I had to go to the market. It was jammed, so I couldn't get out. And the cat says, never thought of it that way. There's a hell of a lot of noise in our society. And so what we're going to do is to pass all those systems. And so eventually we'll try to brush through this a little faster. We move then from cybernation to cyborgs. That's when man redesigns man instead of waits for evolution. Evolution is too slow. It takes too long to make the optimal man. So the optimal man has a brain that works at a given rate. They are already at this phase. They've already developed a gelatinous-like substance that can conduct information as the nervous system does. They will begin to make it more delicate and more sensitive. Then eventually they'll put portions of it in the human brain where you've had areas of the brain removed surgically due to a growth or a tumor. They'll be able to put an area in which learning could occur. Just like if you've got a hearing aid and a heart valve, you know, you're still 99 and 9/10 human. But if you've got scholastic blood vessels and many, many other things, if you bring the guy home, your mother says, is he a human being? You say, mostly. But then if he's got, you know, electromechanical legs, the guy that was injured, with a synthetic mechanical heart, not a transplant, then he's part human, part man. Man will eventually engineer hearts that are smaller, more efficient, lungs that work better, eyes that can see the macro, micro, and submicroscopic world. You understand what I mean? First, the eyes will be put in a human being temporarily, and say, well, just try it for size. The guy looks around and says, there's a whole new world out there. So here, we'll give you back your old eye now. He says, oh, fuck it. And pretty soon, you begin to move into cyborgs. And this is only 15 years from now. We begin to move in that. Because we're near these times. And so what happens is the organism undergoes change. First, you're 50% human, 50% cyborg. Then they design humans without a nose sticking out like that, which we consider as bad engineering, either on the part of deity or evolution. Because when it rains, the water doesn't go up in it, see? This is no good sticking out here, because when you fall on roller skates or anything, you break this cartilaginous substance here, you injure yourself badly. So if the face were flat, with 2 holes running upward, it would accomplish the same thing without a projector. You just say, but I wouldn't go with a guy like that. That's because you're a nose-oriented person, you know? He wouldn't go with you either. You understand what I mean? You say, look at that person with his face hanging out. Okay. So he will have also no nose, and an opening, and another opening like a mouth, and there's another mouth under here. So if you eat anything like salami or bologna, it's ejected right away. This man eats all kinds of shit, he belches and farts, and so I got an upset stomach. Because he has senses in him to take care of the shit. Do you understand what I mean? Because physiologists are very ignorant men. In your school books it says that, isn't man wonderful? He's got a nose and a mouth and a tongue and taste buds. And it goes through all that shit. But if man had a mouth under here that ejected anything that wasn't good for him, it would say in the books, isn't nature wonderful? So you say it isn't wonderful because it doesn't do that. They say nature is wonderful. It gives you antibodies to ward off disease. But why does it put disease there? If God in his infinite wisdom was such a schmuck, He doesn't give you antibodies and then turn the world loose with all kinds of bacteria. See what I mean? Also, if there's a God, he doesn't make his children as stupid as we are. If you had a son, you'd try to make him brighter than you, wouldn't you? I assume that. If you had a daughter or son, you'd try to make them brighter than you. Well, God succeeded in turning out generations of idiots. You understand what I mean? That's why I can't buy the story of God. I can't conceive of anyone so ignorant as to design a tempter. To say, go ahead and tempt these little ignorant bastards. Say, steal, have fun, screw your best friend's life. The story is so ridiculous that we throw it out. Isn't it we don't believe in God? We don't believe in that kind of shit. That's for idiots. All right, so we move on through this system, and man has no nose. Then pretty soon, he can take the radiant energy of the sun and convert it to work energy. Now, if you were half animal and half vegetable, you'd take a shit in a little sack, and that sack would be used by the root system, which is the vegetable area of your body. The carbon dioxide that came out was recycled into the vegetable area, so you wouldn't have to eat anything. You can live on radiant energy. So we will make living organisms that can utilize radiant energy. They will be called either cyborgs or cybernated mechanisms, androids. These are the different terms used. And they will be smart, intelligent, warm, and have the same texture that man has if that's what you require. They will take care of your children. They will educate them. We'll be able to make them that size or that size. And we'll give them the children to play with and have little people, lots of them. And what do you think we ought to do today? Just like a miniature fire engine that you wind up, and a transistor radio gets small. So tonight, I think that's heavy enough for you. You think about it. We generally go for coffee, Pancake House. If you want to join us, you're welcome to do so.